The effective communication of government policies is critical in ensuring public understanding, cooperation, and support. Unfortunately, in many cases, the gap between the intent of a policy and the public's understanding of it can lead to misinformation, mistrust, and even social unrest. Nigeria has faced significant challenges in conveying policies effectively, often due to inadequate stakeholder management, reliance on top-down communication, and failures in transparent messaging. In this episode, we will explore the challenges and opportunities in communicating complex policy issues to diverse audiences, and explore strategies to improve policy communication. By rethinking communication strategies, governments can turn public confusion and mistrust into active support, fostering a stronger connection between policymakers and the people they serve. Welcome to the Leading Woman Show Policy Series. My name is Abosede Jojogan, and today we'll discuss communicating policy, bridging the gap between government and the people. Joining us to discuss this topic today, we have Busola Ajibola, the Deputy Director of the Journalism Program at the Center for Journalism Innovation and Development, with 14 years of expertise in media, research, and advocacy. She has led media development projects across West Africa and champions gender equality and media freedom. Our next guest is Chinenye Wanaka, an award-winning lawyer and policy expert, advising governments and global brands on impactful policies. She's the founder of the Firma Advisory, co-chair of the Nigeria Youth Futures Fund, and convener of the Africa Policy Conversation. Our final guest is Hamzat Lawal, an anti-corruption activist and founder of Follow the Money, where he champions social accountability through data and advocacy. He's also the CEO of Connected Development Code. He empowers underrepresented African communities to engage with governments for improved public services. I'm sure you cannot wait to dive into this conversation, so let's dive in. Shine, Hamzi, and Busola, thank you so much for being here. Really glad to have you. So today we're talking about communicating policy and bridging the gap between government and the people. So I want to start with just a very simple question. Why is transparent communication important when it comes to policies? So let me start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Abosede. I think the reason why transparency in communicating policies is very important is because you need the trust of the people. You need the buy-in of the people to ensure policies are implemented. And I think it's as simple as that. So, and in communicating policies, you want to be sure you're not leaving anyone behind. You want to be sure stakeholders are carried along. And stakeholders, you know, when we're mapping stakeholders for policy communication, we're not just thinking about people high up, you know, in government. You're really thinking about people at national levels, people at sub-national levels. You're thinking about young people. You're thinking about old people. You're just ensuring that you're not leaving anyone who has a role to play in ensuring that policy functions. You're not leaving them behind.
Right.
Yeah.
Hamzi, what would you say? Transparent communication, why is it important when it comes to government policies?
Well, because you want feedback. If you're not transparent, people would not give you feedback. People would say, okay, since you want to force this down our throat, go ahead and let's see how it will succeed. So if you're not transparent, there'll be no buying. And it's important that when you communicate it, even how you communicate it, and what kind of people you use in amplifying these communications. How are you creating platforms for debate to collect feedback? How are you also addressing grievances? Because not every policy would go down well with people. But it's important that you carry them along, because one person can destroy an amazing policy. So it's important that you're transparent, but as you're transparent, you create room for dialogue, for feedback, and continue to build trust. And it's not a one-way journey. You know, you must continue to engage. Use various platforms, various be it traditional or digital. You must also have messaging that resonates with different audience. So you want to run a policy that has to do with national consensus. So it means you have to craft message that has to do with young people, the Gen Zs, the millennials. You want to talk to people in urban area, rural area, old people, young people, women, people with disability, so they feel a sense of belonging and they can take ownership, and that would make it successful.
Fantastic. Chineye, what would you add to that?
I'll just say it's about being user-centric. So who are you designing for? You cannot build a house for me without me seeing the drawing of the house. And a lot of times leaders go ahead to design policy without having the end users in mind, without bringing them into that process. And so that's why we've had cases of policy mismatch. We've had lack of ownership, and we've had lack of effectiveness, frankly, because a lot of policies fail because you're not taking the end user into account.
Right.
Yeah.
And that takes me to my next question. Bosala, what does this lack of involvement, when you don't involve the citizens, right, in this policy design process, what is the cost of that?
Oh, very huge, Abosede, very huge. And rather than, you know, just theorize, I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Look at what happened during the when they changed the currency.
Yes.
I mean, that was a disaster, because if the government had an intention, for example, of changing the currency, you communicate that, you know, way long ahead. You give people ample time to, you know, to prepare.
Make changes.
But look at the cost. In evaluating the cost the Nigerians had to pay for that currency change, I'm not sure we have done enough evaluation to really see how bad it was, because the impact was not on the high and very rich. You know, those ones, I think those ones just probably switched to dollars or maybe other currencies. But I'm speaking about women who sell ugu, women who sell fish, men, if you go into wholesale market, for example, you know, people who just small scale businesses, right? And I mean, I remember a number of times that I went to the market myself, and because that process wasn't communicated enough, we didn't have enough preparation, digital platforms, like digital financial platforms that could easily come into the rescue, were not in place. So you want to buy something as small as, say, 500 naira, and you, the buyer, you are stranded. The seller is stranded.
Honestly.
And the question for me is that, what was the price people who led very small scale business, what price did they have to pay? In the long run, what was the remedy? I don't think a lot of those businesses have come out
recover.
I don't think they've recovered from the cost. And then when you look about the emotional costs of the failure of communicating that policy adequately, I don't know if anyone saw, and I'm sure we saw it, the videos of, you know, people who stripped themselves naked in the bank because they wanted to access
their money.
Money. The old currency wasn't available, the new currency wasn't available. People had medical emergencies that they needed to cater for, and, you know, we were just stranded.
Yes.
And that's one. Another example that that comes to my head right now was the removal of subsidy. So the government, I mean, the new administration comes in the very first day. Everybody was looking forward to, okay, so what are we to look forward to this new government that is being sworn in today? And then the announcement is subsidy is removed. And I think we are still all confused. I am still confused, and I know a couple of other people that are still a bit confused about what was what was the impact of that policy, the floating of the currency. We are here. I think we'd still do 1,700 against $1 now. Government still do maybe 800 against the same $1. I'm asking, for example, so the arbitrage, that comes with all of that, who is benefiting from what? So you say subsidy is removed because some people are corrupt. And for example, I'm thinking that, okay, so these people that are corrupt and benefiting from subsidy are like maybe 1% of 200 million people. Is it very difficult to hold 1% accountable rather than throw the 199 million into chaos? So
yeah,
there is a huge cost. Yes.
There's a huge cost. Hamzi, you're hearing that, and I really appreciate Busola taking us from theory to real life. What comes to mind in terms of when you do not involve citizens in this policy by communicating to them? What happens?
Crisis.
Yes.
Yesterday, the National Bureau of Statistics launched their household survey. Today, people cannot even afford to put Maggi in their food. People cannot buy eggs. People cannot have protein, that's meat, fish, chicken, in their food. And this is evidence-based that because of all of this policy implementation and how government communicated it, the country has gone into crisis. Household cannot manage the shock. People have lost their jobs. People don't have purchasing power again in the market. So when you don't effectively communicate policy and engage stakeholders, then you bring everybody into crisis. There will be chaos. And for you to take them out of crisis, you spend much more money. Lives would probably even be lost. Income, jobs would be lost. Now we're dealing with multiple inflation, multiple taxation. So that's what happened. Crisis. And that's what we're experiencing right now in Nigeria.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Chine, just something as simple as the way you communicate, whether effectively or ineffectively, just has this ripple effect and just this cost. What is this? I mean, can you add anything to the cost that we have to pay?
Yeah, it's disheartening. And, when you look at this knee-jerk reaction, I feel like we're always at that stage where we're like reacting to things. We're not actively planning, forecasting, thinking what are the human costs, what are the costs to businesses, what are the costs to SMEs. And, when you look at the business environment as a whole, investors will tell you that we don't come to Nigeria because of the state of the policy landscape. There's always this policy flip-flops and somersaults. You can't forecast. A lot of businesses closing down industries, it's not because they don't love Nigeria or love our market size. It's just that they can't plan. Why can't they plan? Because there's this knee-jerk reaction all the time, and you cannot, say this is what's going to happen next week or next year. Usually when you're formulating policy and when you're setting the agenda, if you engage the right stakeholders, business community, civil society, all the people who are the policy actors and those who are going to be impacted, benefit, they're supposed to know. That helps them to also factor it into their own business planning, their savings and things like that. But now we have a state of, I call it anyhowness. Things are just done in a haphazard way. There's no long-term vision, and nations are not built like that. If you look at most nations, you need consistent planning efforts. A decade over a decade, there's continuity.
Yes.
And we don't have that in our country, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hamzi, I want to talk a little bit about public trust and accountability. What is this missing link? If government is supposed to serve people, what is the gap that has led to such mistrust between the people and the people who should be serving them? And should we be doing more to hold them accountable? Or are we also handicapped?
That's an interesting question. I'll start with this. First is politics. Because what brought us here, a lot of people would say, oh, it's public policy. But before public policy, you play politics first. So how do you play that politics? It starts with the political party. How do candidates emerge? Sadly, it's been monetarized or dollarized, whatever you choose to call it. And then when you have people who go into politics and use their money to buy their way into public office, the first thing they want to do is recuperate that money and also make so much money to prepare for the next election cycle where they have to bring money so that they can continue to occupy that office. Politics itself is supposed to be about public service. But when it's about money, then trust is eroded. Because you see, when you can access your legislator at the National Assembly, or when you even go and visit your legislator and then he say, hey, I've sorted you people when I did my campaign. You have no right to ask me for anything because I've sorted you. And once it's time for campaign, I'll come back and sort you people again. So I think for us to build back that trust, because honestly, there is no trust. And sadly, when there is no trust, there's no policy that would work, no matter how brilliant it is. If citizens don't trust you, because again, trust is about perception.
Yes.
And if there is a perception that there's corruption, there's mismanagement, there's embezzlement, and there's lack of consequence. And that's why we're here. Lack of consequence. There are no consequence for actions or inactions. Everything go. Then citizens will now become apathetic and say, well, why do I have to engage or hold you to account when there are no consequence? Okay. My sister talked about removal of subsidy. The president has said there is a cabal. So who are these cabal? What I had expected is that an investigation would take place, where names would be mentioned, where people will be prosecuted. And then when you remove subsidy, Nigerians will say, well,
this is the price we're paying.
This is the price we're paying.
The collective price we're paying
Exactly.
because of this.
Exactly. And then government have not yet communicated to us that, okay, from the savings of removal of subsidy, this is what we're using it for. Rather, they're saying we've increased VAT allocation to states. So go and talk to your state governors. So again, everybody continue to shift the goalpost and the table. No, don't ask me. Ask the governors. The governors are saying now, they've declared local government autonomy. Go and ask your local government chairman. So everybody keeps to erode accountability and consequence. And that's why there's lack of trust. That's why no policy would work. And sadly, this will continue to lead to apathy, whereby hopefully in 2027, you see less people come out to cast their ballots.
Whew. That's a good place to take a breath and take a quick break, and we'll continue this conversation when we get back. Welcome back to the conversation. We're still talking about communicating policy, bridging the gap between government and the people. But I want to come to you and talk about the role of the media. What is the role of the media in communicating government policy?
Okay, so one of the fundamental roles that the media play in a democracy is information dissemination, right? So you would expect that the job of journalists is to, not just take information from government, but really analyze that information in languages, in ways, right, that the people would understand. So that would not just be, language. That would be maybe using infographics. That would be public engagement. Just generally facilitating what we'll call like a public space where everyone can, give feedback, share their opinion, express their frustration, and all of that. Having identified the role that the media should be playing, maybe the next thing should be how effectively as the media in Nigeria played that role. I work within the media ecosystem, so But sometimes I also think that there are so many things that we could do better in terms of, you know, asking the very hard questions. So when there's obscurity around policies, you would expect also journalists have to go back to policymakers and really ask questions, because you're asking these questions on behalf of 200 plus million that do not have the microphone,
That's right.
that do not have the platform.
Yes.
I think some of the struggles that the media has in performing that role effectively would be sometimes knowledge gap, right? So to understand policies in specific sectors, you need knowledge yourself. In fact, close to you have to be an expert, right? You understand the nuances. So when you're asking questions, you know the right questions to ask,
Exactly.
you know the person to go to. But I think the toughest challenge would also be that policymakers often perceive the media in Nigeria as, you know, from an adversarial lens. So you think that this person who is a journalist putting me on the spotlight, asking me this question is a nuisance, right? And then you see how that perception manifests in the escalation of attack against the media. I mean, I work with the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development. And one of the very important work that we do is tracking incidents of attacks against journalists. And I will tell you that between the time that this government was sworn in, for example, and today, we've recorded about 140-something incidents of attacks. And I tell you categorically that when you do the analysis of the data, who are the perpetrators? State actors, police, DSS, somebody in government, governor's son, you know, like that and like that. It's an indication that people in government do not want to be asked questions. So the question is, so how are you communicating policies when you do not want to speak to the fourth estate, the people who have the responsibility of information dissemination, right? So I think too, well, that whether we like it or not, the media has its job cut out. It's a tough job, but we have to do it.
Yeah.
And one way or the other, I think there is so much more that the media can do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Hamzi, what do you think that the media can do better? So that started to talk a little bit about certain, you know, there are constraints, real constraints. And I guess, or is there a way around that? Because as she said, once you lock the media out, then you genuinely don't even want to reach the people that they reach, right? So what can the media do better?
You know, interestingly, it's clearly stated in the Constitution, the role of the media, and they're the only ones that even got that recognition as the fourth estate of the realm. But then in Nigeria, let's look at the landscape. Who are the media owners? What are their interests? And let's also look at it. How do they get, or how do they generate revenue? Because right now, we look at society and sometimes we think media too are not going through the same thing, even much more what we are going through. Because no matter what, they must be on the front line. They must report. They must analyze. They must take feedback. For me, I think we need to get to a place where we would create an endowment for the media. Because what we need are independent media, not dependent. Because when media is dependent, then who pays the piper will determine the tune.
That's right.
So as much as we want them to do their job, we must ensure that they're safe, they have resources, they have insurance, they're well paid, so that when they do their job, they can carry themselves with dignity and truly serve the Nigerian people. So I'm not exonerating them, but I believe that they can do much more, but we must give them the tools so they can do the job that the Constitution has guaranteed them to do.
I agree. Absolutely. Chine, you started talking about the cost around stakeholders, even stakeholders outside the country. And, for example, why our foreign direct investment is just going downhill. So how does government get stakeholder buy-in? We've spoken a lot about the citizens, but there are other stakeholders, right? So with their policies, how do they get stakeholder buy-in that actually moves us forward?
Yeah, while we're talking, I was just thinking it's all about the social contracts. And there's been, that social contract has been breached, unfortunately, and the people are not there. The leaders, some of the leaders, and across board, right, different tiers of governments, it's almost like they don't feel like they're there for the people, or people, let me say the citizens. Especially when you look at the National Assembly, that's supposed to be the arm of government that represents the people. They don't, when they speak most times, citizens are like, these people are not speaking for us. They're not our representatives. So they feel like they don't have a voice, and they feel like they're just there for themselves. So, but then in terms of the wider stakeholder ecosystem that you mentioned, policies have implications, and one bad statement and one bad sentiment, it goes a long way. And the beauty of Nigeria is a blessing and a curse. We're everywhere. We're online. Our social media, when something is trending in Nigeria on Twitter or X now, it's trending all over the world.
Yes.
And that can be very good for sectors like the creative industry, fashion, music, all that stuff, because it goes viral. Well, guess what? The bad news in Nigeria is bad news everywhere. So when you're traveling across the world, they're like, oh, we saw this just happened in Nigeria. They know so much about us. Even other African countries, when we get into those debates, you see that they're always winning us because they have debt on us. So unfortunately, I always see sometimes our governments, we spend too much money traveling all around the world looking for investors. If you make Nigerians happy, they'll be your ambassadors. Nigerians in the diaspora, Nigerians on Twitter would sell our markets, that we don't even need to start doing so much, road shows and all that stuff. So I think make your people happy, solve the problems at home, and it will have a ripple effect.
So Hamzi and Chineye, I want to quickly hear from you about how government can become more effective before we go on a break. Hamzi.
I think government needs to leave her comfort zone. They're too comfortable. They stay in fancy building with air conditioning, and they think that this is what is right for the people. They don't leave that comfort to go to their various constituents. So just take a road trip. If you ask an average politician, when last did you travel by road, you'll be shocked. You only find them at the Abuja Airport Lounge, so they need to leave their comfort so that they can witness everyday Nigeria, what they pass through, and then take that into cognizance. Secondly is use data. What data are they using to inform policy and decision making? National Bureau of Statistics have a lot of data. Why are they not using that data to inform how their decisions impact individuals and households?
Fantastic.
So for me, I think we need a mindset shift. We need to understand that leadership is about service, and because of that, we need our leaders to be humble. Humility is the answer. You need to be able to listen, learn, iterate, and adapt. Unfortunately, we have leaders who feel like they know it all, they don't have time, and because of that, anybody, even the smallest person, has something for you to learn. So a lot of people need to go back and reorientate themselves. They also need to build capacity. I think not everybody should be a leader. Unfortunately, our leadership recruitment process has brought out some of the people who are not the best of us to represent all of us. And so we really need to go, because that's the only way you can have a better and more inclusive process. Thank you.
Fantastic. It's time for us to take another break. When we return, we'll take some audience questions. Welcome back. So now let's go to some audience questions. Who has a question?
Good day, everyone. My name is Stephen Owojecho Oko, and my question is, how is the media coverage of policy be inclusive of the people in the rural area?
I think that's a very important question. Hamzi, let me let you take that one.
I know that we have community radios that organize programs and town halls and also help disseminate information. But you see, interestingly, the only person who grants license, be it community radio, be it even national radio, it's just Mr. President. Yes, for you to get license to run a radio station, it must be approved by the president. But recommendation comes from the Minister of Information. So what that means is if you don't know somebody that knows somebody, or you're not a political chieftain of the president's party, no matter how much you want to help inform
Your
people
community.
at the grassroots, you never get license to operate. And that's where a lot of us do community outreach. And journalists do investigative reporting, going down to these communities. And it comes with a risk. I remember when there was a time we were doing a campaign in Zamfara, and we were attacked by what you call bandits now. At that time, they were cattle rustlers. And for us, we wanted to go to community and collect feedback with the lead poisoning and artisanal mining that government had called illegal mining. So we were attacked by bandits, but at that time they were called cattle rustlers. So if not that God was on our side, we would literally be taken off the surface of the earth. So that's currently the reality, sadly. So except there's a review whereby the way you get license when you operate a community radio, because the easiest one, data has shown that even if we have mobilely upward young people, a lot of people still access information first from radio. Because when you look at cost of data, how many people have smartphone? Even with your smartphone, do you know data is so expensive?
It is.
Nigeria pays very expensive data. When you say you subscribe 5 gig, you're not so go and see 5 gig when you travel to UK. You spend 1 month, your 5 gig is still remaining. But here in 2 days, say it's finished. So again, is for us to continue that outreach, or we review how we give license to community radio station to help disseminate information at the grassroots.
Fantastic. We have another question.
Good day, everyone. My name is Eke Chamaka Mary Ann. Before I dive into my question, I must say you all are looking beautiful today. Now, my question: what steps can the Nigerian government put in place in order to build back trust of its citizens? Thank you.
So, I mean, we've spoken a lot about trust today, but Chine, do you want to maybe say something quickly?
Yeah, it's just about going back to the fundamentals, right? To build trust, you need to include people. So it's about inclusion. And sometimes I know government wants to act fast and they want to do things, and so they feel like it's a waste of time to start including everyone, but there's a way you can have that stakeholder group, even if it's just the leadership of those groups, So the government has to do that thorough job, because when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, you actually need those people at the end of the day to get feedback, to know what has worked, what hasn't worked, what should we discontinue. So there's a policy cycle, right, from the agenda setting to the policy formulation and implementation and all that. So we cannot just have only one arm. I think we just focus only on the formulation, because even the implementation is even a problem. So I think we need to be rigorous. I think we need to take pains. I know that it's tough to be governing and managing, putting out fires, but we need to have the arms of government who are supposed to focus on this, focus on it, and not politicize it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So what would you add to that?
I think it would be to bring back the culture of town hall engagement. I just feel like there's so much that can do, in making the people feel like the government cares and that they have access to government. When you know that you have access to your leaders, you have their ears, and then you have a platform to communicate how specific policies are impacting you. I think the process of building trust just becomes natural. It just comes to you naturally, and you would see that the level of civic engagement increases from what it currently is. But I don't think we should leave that job at the footstep of our leaders alone. I don't know, but I understand why Nigerian citizens right now might feel at that place where everybody's just concerned about survival. Things are hard, I just want to be fine. Especially young people, I think we all have to be more involved, in the process of accountability. If you already have a social media platform, that means you have some degree of voice, that you can use, not necessarily to be rude or to be combative,
engage.
but to engage, just ask questions. You never know who is listening and where answers might come from.
Fantastic. Those were very important questions, and I'm glad that we got to hear them. Now, we'll see what some Nigerians out there have to say before we take closing remarks from our guests.
Okay, I don't even feel like the government cares at all. Not talk of putting us in the loop of projects that they have planned.
Wọn kì í jẹ́ ká mọ̀ nǹkan tó bá dẹ̀ ń lọ a kì í mọ̀ torí wọ́n máa ti sọ láàrin ara wọn a lè mọ̀ anything.
I don't think the government really keeps us in the loop about those things, since it's mostly through social media that I personally get such information from.
I would say they should try to put it out more on social media, because most of the time they put it on news and newspaper, but this generation hardly does anyone actually check those things. So they should put it out on social media more.
Maybe they should involve the press more, I believe, and it should be... I can't really find the word I'm looking for, but it should just make it more known.
Okay, majorly it's through social media. It's a very vast way to find out about things. Social media, or people around you, your friends, news also. Yeah, generally just things that happen around us.
It's always a mystery. We just end up finding out on social media on something. It's not like we're pre-informed or something.
Yeah, I received through social media, through my school and friends.
I'll say social media. Yeah, social media.
Okay, I feel like the government could be more intentional, right? To show the people that they really, really care and they really want to keep in touch, right? So they can start working with influencers, putting up announcements on social medias, just to carry people along, basically.
So many important points have been highlighted on this episode, but to bring our conversation to a close, I would love to hear final thoughts from our guests. So let's start with you, Chineye.
How do you know you're going to start with me? So it's been an amazing conversation. We need to continue the conversation. And basically my call to action, first to the general public, right? To the citizens. We have a nation to build. We are all stakeholders. It's about agency. We must all see ourselves where we fit into the puzzle, right? To our policymakers, to our elected officials, we must ensure that we set aside our selfish interests. We must remember the oath of office that we took, and we must come there with a heart of humility and a heart of service. It's very critical to the existence of our nation, right? Especially at this juncture. To the elite in Nigeria, the elites have a role, because most nations have advanced because of elite consensus. Unfortunately, because of tribe and religion and other factors, we've not been able to have the elites come together to speak with one voice and hold the leadership accountable, because most times the leaders are produced by the elites. And so we must set aside our selfish interests as elites, be it for contracts or politics or whatever it might be, and put this nation forward, put this nation first. And then to the masses, the average citizens, we must educate ourselves. We need active citizens. We can no longer sit down, complain. No. Hold your local government leaders accountable. Hold your councillors, your House of Assembly members. educate yourself, know what is in the constitution, because all of us are needed to build this country, and 200 million people cannot jackpot. So, yes.
Word. Nowhere can take us, Hamzi.
We can run a country without consequence. We must hold ourselves to account, but much more hold our leaders to account. Every public policy comes with resource mobilization and utilization. Let me break this down. For every policy governments bring forward, it means trillions of naira, because that's the language we speak, will be expended. How are you following that money? Because if you don't follow that money and ask question that is informed, that money would move to personal pockets and will continue to well. So my final thoughts are, let's follow the money, and maybe we'll get those important answers to the burning questions that Nigerians are yearning for.
Fantastic. Sarah.
I think my final thoughts would be an appeal to our leaders. There can be no government without the people. So I think our leaders need to be more intentional about putting people at the center of policy making. I hope that we all can get to a point when we know from a place of deep conviction that when our leaders make policies, it is because they are really looking out for our interests. I don't think we're at that point yet, and so I'm just going to end with that appeal.
Fantastic. Now, we would like to thank our guests for joining us on today's episode. Thank you to Busola Ajibola, to Chineye Nwanaka, and to Hamzat Lawal for coming on today's episode. And of course, to our live audience, thank you for being such an amazing part of this show. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media to share your thoughts on the episode using the hashtag on your screen. I'm your host, Abosede Jojogan. Until next week, remember, women's leadership can change everything, everywhere. Bye for now.